and to seek out and celebrate women's achievements like we're doing tonight. From challenge comes change. Each year's theme is marked with a pose, and we've had some fun with this in the past. We thought, even though we're virtual, we'll give it a try. So I would ask everyone to raise their right hand high and strike the choose to challenge pose. Rebecca is going to try to take a photo of us all on Zoom so that we can share this after the event. So you let me know when I can keep going there, Rebecca. All right, thanks. Thanks everybody for indulging us. So we're so glad you joined us. We respect your time. As promoted, our intention is to wrap up the evening at 8 o'clock. So directly after Dee speaks, we will go into our draw. And if there's any time left afterward, we really welcome your questions for Dee. So now please join me in welcoming Dee Christensen. Take it away, Dee.
Hi guys, it's so strange not doing this physically in front of you, but just the same, I'm incredibly honored to be asked back to speak for you guys. If you've heard me speak before, you know that I'm fairly open and forthcoming about the experiences that I've had. I am going to talk a bit about the Planet Diner and, you know, its origin story, but I'm also going to talk a little bit about my own origin story. Part of the reason that I do that anytime I speak at an event like this is that, you know, whatever I have because I stood on the shoulders of giants. And, you know, most of those giants were men. Part of the reason is that when I looked up at the plateau I wanted to land on, there weren't a lot of women up there. And the women who were up there weren't reaching down for other women. So I promised myself that when I finally got to the place that I wanted to be, that I would be one of those giants, that I would do my best to reach down for the people after me. And that also includes people who started out way low on the bottom rungs, because that's where I started out. You know, and it's much easier to keep climbing if you see just a little bit of inspiration up there. So I wanted to be one of those people, maybe that offered an example that if I can do it, anyone can do it. So I'm going to start my little story in the beginning, and I promise it's going to be a Coles Notes version of my background. I was born in Truro, Nova Scotia in 1975. I was born to a fairly abusive birth father who lived with alcoholism and a fairly abusive birth mother who lived with a lot of mental illness. I was told when I was a kid that my purpose was to save a dying marriage. Something apparently I didn't achieve because when I was 2, my dad ran away from home. My mother at the time was left with sort of 2 choices. She could keep us where we were in the house that we owned, surrounded by aunts and uncles and grandparents, but she also had no high school education, and it was 77 at the time, and she had no way to support us. So her alternate option was to chase my father across the country. And that's what she chose to do. So when I came online as a human, we were living in Edmonton, Alberta. Growing up was a little bit like being born in the middle of a movie that was half over and nobody would explain the first half of the story to me. I didn't really understand what anybody was talking about. I didn't know anything about Nova Scotia. I didn't know anything about the aunts, the uncles, the grandparents. I didn't even really have an understanding of who my birth father was. So I kind of felt left out of everything. And then to add to that, everybody around me was kind of angry and heartbroken. And the last thing anybody needed was a kid roaming around. I was a lot younger than my siblings. So unfortunately, growing up in poverty, growing up in poor neighborhoods, I was put at risk a lot. And a few monsters came into my room at night. There were often men coming in and out of our house. But around 4 years old, my saving grace came in the form of my grandmother. God bless grandmothers. My grandmother moved in with us, and my Nana became the center of my planet. And I had 4 years with her. And it was as if the universe made sure to send me someone so unabashedly in love with me, because they knew that I would only get 4 years of being parented. So it had to be really concentrated. So for the 4 years that I was with her, no harm came to me, and I was protected. And every time I had night terrors, I had someone to climb in with at night, and I had someone taking care of me. And it really was truly just Nana and I. I woke up long after my siblings and my birth mother had gone to work. I went to bed way before any of them got home. I really just didn't see anybody but my Nana. So when I was around 9 years old, it was pretty devastating the first time I heard the word Alzheimer's disease. I didn't really understand what it was. And what I knew is that she was starting to do really strange things. You know, the faucets were running when I got home, or the stove was on and it was lit up red, all four coils, or the door was open, or she wasn't home. And as a background, my Nana, she lived with agoraphobia, which, if you don't know, is a fear of leaving the house. So when she wasn't home, that was instantly alarming. The phone would be ringing. It would be someone at the corner store saying, this woman is lost and doesn't know who she is. And I remember trying to reason with her, because I knew I had an acute understanding of what would happen if she left my life, the kind of danger that I would be in. And I remember not getting it and trying to explain it to her. Listen, you got to pull it together, because you don't know how bad this is going to get if you don't. And I also remember that because I was the one with her in the morning, when it became too dangerous, Wanda, my birth mother, left me responsible for trying to get her into a cab to take her to a day program. You could no sooner have tried to bottle a storm, you know, in a glass Coke bottle. Getting my Nana into that cab with a stranger was like, that was never going to happen. And so that anxiety sort of began, right? If I gotta leave her at home alone, but if I leave her at home alone, she'll be in danger. I'm going to screw up. I got to go to school. If I don't go to school, I'm going to get in trouble. But if I go to school, I'm going to get in trouble. It was this like rapid anxiety. And anyway, I failed. I went to school. I didn't get her in the cab. And she was, you know, inevitably in danger. So it wasn't long after that that she was taken from our home. She was taken to eventually a hospital. And that was fine with me, because every moment I wasn't in school, I was in the hospital with her. I was walking her and reading to her and feeding her. And I spent every moment with her. I don't remember going to birthday parties. I don't remember hanging out with friends. I don't remember anything during that time except being with her. And so I came home from school one day when I was about 11 years old. And I remember my birth mother had met a man by then, and she informed me that we were moving to a small rural town in Saskatchewan, and we would be leaving that weekend. And I had a very short period of time. I think I had 4 days. I didn't grip what was happening. I was being taken from our home, from my siblings, but most importantly, I was being removed from my Nana. You know, in my lifetime, I've had a lot of hits. I've experienced every form of child abuse that exists. But I will tell you that to this day, that moment never healed quite right. That was my climactic moment. Would turn me into a different direction, because a piece of me broke in that moment. Because biologically she was my grandmother, but for all intents and purposes, she was my mummy. and I was being taken away from her, and I didn't understand. Life was pretty dark and not okay after that. Unfortunately, with mental illness, when my birth mother wasn't in a structured, stable environment, things got pretty bad. So it was pretty violent, and it was pretty dangerous, and it was pretty awful. But the one amazing thing that started to happen not long after that, when I arrived in that rural town, was puberty. Puberty started to happen. And I remember that until puberty, I had no positive attributes that I could talk about. I wasn't smart like my sister. I wasn't artistic like my brother. I didn't really have anything to contribute in any way. But when I started to go through puberty, I realized I'm pretty. I'm kind of pretty. And finally, I had one asset that I could bank on. If nothing else, I'm pretty and I can't screw that up. And so that became the asset I banked on. The rest of my high school years and junior high school years were in and out of foster care. It was a pretty horrible time in my life. And when I finally did graduate high school, I remember having no plan. It hadn't even occurred to me to apply to school. It didn't even occur to me that was an option. And what little time I spent around my birth mother, it never occurred to her to ask about it. I remember I was living with her at the end of grade 12, and I came home from school one day, and she showed me this funny little outline, and I didn't know what it was. And she said, "Oh, I drove up to the city today and I rented you an apartment." And she was so excited. And so she dropped me off in that apartment with everything she owned in the world. And she took off after some guy into the Yukon, I believe. And so I just turned 18 and I'm living in this little apartment. And remember, I don't have any assets whatsoever other than this. This is the only asset I can bank on. I don't know I'm smart yet, and I don't know that I'm creative yet, but I know that I'm pretty. And when you don't arm a woman, a girl, with all those other amazing, fantastic traits, if she has this asset, that's the one the world seems to be hell-bent on supporting. So that's the one I used. Ironically, during that year, I must have worked at every single fast food place known to man. And I say ironically because you just don't know when the universe is writing the genesis of your story. Because despite the fact that I did train to be a chef, it was actually some of the things I learned at all those fast food places that became the foundation of the diner that I own today. The way that I wrap burritos is from that time. If you've come into my diner, you probably had one of my cinnamon buns. I worked at Cinnabon 100 years ago. So it was ironic to me that I did pick up some things back then. However, one of the things that's worth noting is that, you know, when you come from a place that I come from, you're armed with survival skills. You aren't armed with life skills. And in order to learn, you have to learn things like stability, longevity. You have to learn things like conflict resolution. I didn't have that ability. So every place I worked, you know, I would inevitably have some kind of dramatic breakdown, or I would lose my head on someone, or they would lose their head on me and I would flip them off, and I would eventually lose my job. And so at some point I need to find work, and I start working at a nightclub. It turns out they asked me if I can dance, and I said, yeah, I'm a great dancer. I'm not a great singer, but I'm a great dancer. So I'm one of those, I become a go-go dancer, which if you're in a really hopping nightclub, those are the girls they put in the cages or on the scaffoldings, or they essentially make the club look like it's more happening. They paid me $50 for 2 hours. And at the time, minimum wage was $4.25. So I was killing it. And, you know, I'll wear what you want me to wear, a little Budweiser bikini, I don't care. I have this one asset that I can bank on. And unfortunately, at that point, I started developing my own addiction. And by the end of that year, you know, by the time I was 19, I was in rehab and I had been to 3 detox centers. I had almost died once. Um, I had a criminal record with several charges on it, not the least of which was related to communicating with for the purpose of prostitution. So it was an ugly year. So when I say that I started out on the bottom rung and that it is possible, I mean that from my heart. So I get sober. I'm living in this halfway house. The halfway house is filled with girls who all have drug addictions. I would love to tell you that I got clean because I had this incredible desire that would be absolutely not true. The honest truth is, I walked into that detox center because by the end of that year, I was homeless and I heard they had free food. They had beds and they had free food. And I would love to tell you that I stayed because I got a little taste of something and I wanted to, that would be not true. If I stayed or made anything of myself, it was because of all the good people along the way. Because I was without question a foul-mouthed, snot-nosed kid at the time. And I think now about all those social workers and nurses and physicians and police officers along my path that made decisions that made it easier for me to turn left over right. And that's as deep as it is. They made it easier for me. Well, I could do this, but that's easier right now, so I'll do that. At no point did I ever think, you know what, this feels kind of right. You know, I want to make something of myself. I really didn't. I simply, they opened up a path for me, absolutely thanklessly. At no point did I ever go back and thank them. It never even occurred to me. So God bless those kinds of people that do jobs like that for kids like me. So inevitably, because of a social worker, you know, I end up in this halfway house. I am just 19 years old. It was about 10 days before my 19th birthday, and I landed in the halfway house just after that. And so one of the rules in early recovery is don't make any major decisions for the first year. And I have no idea why or how, but secretly, while I was living in this halfway house, I applied for a student loan. So I don't know where I thought I could do that. I don't know where that idea came from. I assume by then my Nana has died. I often think that was her. She was like, go get this application. I don't know, because that certainly didn't come from me. But secretly I apply for a student loan and I'm given the student loan. I use the halfway house as my address. I get the student loan and I apply to university. By then I'm an adult student. I did graduate high school, fortunately. So I choose criminology. And again, I'd love to tell you it was because I had this incredible desire to change the world. The truth is, when I was looking down majors, I didn't know what the hell any of the other words meant. But criminology, I figured, had something to do with criminals. And if I knew anything, I knew a little about that by then. So I studied criminology. So it was around my second year, in the summer after my second year, one of my best friends said to me at the time, you know, you should go work for a temp agency. And I was like, I don't even know what that is. She said, well, you know, you do like typing and stuff. Like you're a receptionist. You don't have to know anything. You can totally fake it. And I was like, well, I'll do that. I still don't know I'm smart yet. I still don't know I have a whole lot of assets, but I'm no longer strictly banking on this anymore. So I'm making progress by then. So I interviewed for this temp agency, and I remember the interview. She says, you need to know Microsoft Word and Excel, and you need to be fairly well versed in it. Are you fairly well versed in both those? And I said, absolutely. I had never even turned a computer on, and I owned one. I think it had a blinking green bar. That was about all. You need to be able to type 60 words a minute. Are you able to type 60 words per minute? And I said, absolutely, I can type 60 words per minute. I never took a single typing class. I'm fairly certain that I was outside having a cigarette. I don't even know, because when I went to high school, that was actually, I think it was a required class, but I don't once remember ever being in it. And so I fake my way into this position, and I land a job working at a commercial real estate firm as a receptionist. Within 2 weeks, some of the partners of the firm take a liking to me, and one in particular said, "You're really smart." And I remember having this, like, the thing about kids like me is we have the instincts of a jungle cat. We know when we're in danger. This guy had no interest in this whatsoever. A lot of the other partners in the firm were distracted, but this guy, he didn't give a crap about that. He actually believed that I was smart. He said, "How would you like to come work for me in the investment division?" And I was like, I don't even know. I don't even know really what that means. He said, "Well, I could pay you $38,000 a year. You get full benefits. You get 2 weeks paid vacation." And I was trying to play it cool, but I was losing my mind in my head. I didn't know anyone who was making that kind of money. And I was like, I'll give it some thought. Meanwhile, I go in the bathroom and squeal like someone just gave me a 649 ticket. So I take a job working in the commercial investment division of this real estate firm. My job essentially was to initially just do marketing proposals. I learned InDesign, I learned Photoshop at its inception. But at some point I start working with an analyst, and it turns out I'm really good with numbers. And the analyst was really fascinated by that, and so he spent a lot of time with me. So I start training as a commercial analyst. And eventually I'm learning all about what cap rates are, and I'm doing rent comparisons, and I'm doing proposals, and I'm talking to potential investors about what investments are good and what investments aren't as good. And I applied during that time. I applied for 3 positions working as a commercial realtor. When you at the time, I don't know what it's like anymore, but at the time, if you wanted to be a commercial real estate agent, you first had to get a job working with one. You were sort of grandfathered in. And I had interest from a lot of the partners. They wanted me to work for them. They wanted me to be their commercial real estate assistant, which meant that you get a real estate license. At the time in the city of Calgary, there was but one female commercial realtor. It's still an old boys club, but back then it was really bad. And of course, her name around camp was the bitch. And was she a bitch? No, she was a woman who was really good in business. And, she had specific qualities that are usually seen as being male-like qualities. So I really wanted to do this. And I had first the support of the very first realtor, but by the second and third try at this job, I had the support of every partner in the firm. But the last person that I needed a check mark from was the general manager. The general manager of our firm was a woman. And that was a defining moment for me as a woman, because That was the first, if you're a woman my age or older, you know what it is to experience that feeling among women. I had to claw my way up here, and I am not sharing. You are not, there's no way that I'm sharing this with you. And so, not once, not twice, but 3 times, I turned down for a position for a male who's less experienced and less educated than I am. So I decide, I'm done. I'm not going to try again. I apply for a position in Toronto. I don't even know why. I saw a position working at CTV in the finance department, and I didn't think I'd get it. But I did. And so that's what brought me to Ontario. So I stayed in the field of finance until my, I think I was about 34. By the time I was 30 years old, I'd owned 3 properties of my own. I did really well. And, around 30 years old, I remember having, this moment. I was on the highway and I was coming home, and I was working in downtown Toronto, and I owned this waterfront condo in Oakville. And I remember coming home and thinking, if there's a list in life, I'm fairly certain I've checked every box. And no sooner did that thought enter the atmosphere, I remember thinking, wow, I am really unhappy. Like, it was that moment that I suddenly realized I have absolutely no passion for what I'm doing. And the fact that I am utterly financially secure is of no consequence whatsoever. I'd rather be poor because I'm so bored. I'm so unfulfilled. And so over the next 4 years, I finally get brave enough. I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to leave my profession. All my friends supported me. So I apply in the field of social work. I think I thought that that would be more meaningful. I could also transfer some of my criminology credits. One of the prerequisites to get into social work was to get what's called a health passport. A health passport essentially means you go to a physician, they run your blood work, they give you a hepatitis shot. They inadvertently, when I took this blood work to get my health passport to get into social work, my doctor walks in the room and he says, Dee, I'm really concerned about your cholesterol. I was like, what? He said, yeah, I do you have any history of heart disease in your family? I said, well, I know my dad had a heart attack before he died. And I know that my Nana had a heart attack on the maternal side. And he said, yeah, I'm pretty concerned. Like, if your cholesterol gets any higher, we're going to have to consider putting you on a drug. My mind was blown. I went home that day and I was like, you've got to be joking me. I'm way too young to have cholesterol problems. And so I was walking home, and I mean, at that point, if I was anything, I am such a pragmatist. I get home and I do what any pragmatist would do. I draft a spreadsheet. And it was an incredible spreadsheet as a sidebar. I mean, it had pivot tables. Basically, I put in every single thing I eat, and I look up the nutritional information of all of it, and I start studying how much cholesterol I'm taking in a day. So I create this equation, and I'm going to follow it. And essentially, in order to meet my target cholesterol number, I am going to give up meat. And at the time, the decision to give up meat was based on the fact that I didn't want to give up ice cream and I didn't want to give up cream in my coffee. So that was the easiest choice I could make. So I give up meat. And I mean, I follow this thing to the letter. I am way under my cholesterol levels. I'm killing it. A year later, I go back to my doctor, and I had this worked out in my mind. It was going to be a scene from a movie. He's going to come in the room and go, Dee, you blew it out of the water. Holy cow, what have you been doing? Your cholesterol's like nothing. I've got a calculation down. I'm way under the mark. So he walks in the room and he goes, it's time we start talking about medications. And I was like, what? He kept talking and I just kept saying, what? What are you? He kept talking. What are you talking about? I have a spreadsheet. That is literally not possible. I know it's really concerning and it's alarming, but we need to start talking about putting you on a medication. My spreadsheet has pivot tables. I don't think you get, I've got a calculation worked out. Like there's no, it's mathematically not possible, I say to him. He says, sometimes it's a genetic anomaly. Your body isn't recognizing plant-based or meat, animal-based proteins the way other people's does. It's not anything you're doing wrong, but you're not going to be able to manage this on your own. And I thought, challenge accepted, my friend. Challenge accepted. You just watch me. I had looked up the side effects of some of the medications he's talking about, and I'm like, I'm not ready. At that point, I'm 35 years old. I'm in school full time. And again, you just never know when the genesis of your greatest story is being written. Because if you told me then that I would one day own a predominantly plant-based restaurant, I thought you were out of your mind. There was a time when I was in university the first time that I had trained to be a chef. And, you know, I worked in food, but by the time I hit my 30s, I was a foodie, and I'm a foodie from Alberta, no less. I'm a meat girl. There's no way. So I'm 35 and I go home that day and I start studying plant-based foods. And I decide to try becoming a plant-based eater. I was miserable. I didn't know what tofu was. I remember taking it out of a pack and poking it, and it poked me back a little. I didn't know. I'd eaten vegetables, but they were mostly cut down into tiny squares and they were from a bag. Like I just didn't know what I was doing. And so the first year was pretty dark. I was trying really hard, and I wasn't cheating. I was eating plant-based, but I was pretty miserable. And then the old instincts of, when I trained part-time as an apprentice in my off time to be a chef when I was in my early 20s, and I trained under a French chef. And so I start going back to my training in my head, and I think, okay, you know what? There's got to be some vegan chefs out there. I'll look it up. So I start researching, and I'm doing all these recipes, and every single recipe that I try tastes like health food. It tastes like quinoa and kale had a baby. That's what it tasted like. And I was like, this is not for me. This is awful. And so kind of in the last hour, I have this thought in my head. By this time, I've already graduated. I believe if not, I'm almost graduated from social work. I did graduate top of my class. And I knew near the end, this wasn't for me. It was a lot of, it was emotionally draining, and I just wasn't sure what I wanted to do. But I knew this wouldn't be it. And it was around that time that I have this idea, why don't I go back to Nana's old recipes? Like, why don't I start with something like her pumpkin pie? Maritime pumpkin pie is serious. It's spicy. It's way better than your pumpkin pie. I promise. My grandmother's pumpkin pie was incredible. And so I go back and I think, well, I'll take this recipe of Nana's and I'll look at the not vegan ingredients and I'll start swapping them out. Forget these vegan recipes. I'm not eating like that. I want to eat like I eat, but I just want I want it not to spike my cholesterol levels. So this is a pastime. This is just, it's not ever going to amount to anything. I wasn't even thinking it would, but I made a lot of really crappy pumpkin pies. I made a lot of really crappy donuts. I made a lot of really crappy mac and cheeses. And at some point, at some point, one at a time, I start nailing these recipes. And I'm like, yep, that's Nana's pumpkin pie. Yep, that's her dough. And I, developed what would later become proprietary information. Um, and it was around that time that my friend said, well, what do you want to do now? Because you graduated in social work. I actually won an award for highest academic achievement, and I had no interest in doing it. And I said, I think I'm just going to be a waitress for a while. And so they thought I was crazy because I could have gone back in finance. And at that point, I was making some real money. And I was like, no, by this point, that's the beauty of being closer I pushed to 40, the less I had to prove. I had already owned homes. I'd already done all that. I just thought, whatever, I don't care. I'm going to be a waitress. So I became a waitress. It was about a year into waitressing, I realized if it's possible to do this for a living, this is what I want to do. And I don't care. I don't care how crazy that sounds. I don't care that I could make a lot more money going back into, finance. I don't care that I graduated in social work. I want to be a waitress. I want to work in food. There's something about this that makes me so incredibly happy. By the time I hit 40, I had quite a resume of incredible recipes that I'd created. And at that point, I started having this idea in my head that I want to open my own restaurant. And really, the idea came from the notion that I'm 40 and I would like to retire some point in the next 20 years. How do I do that and be a waitress at the same time? That was really it's a numbers game. At this point, if I'm not the boss, and I can't be investing, I'm not going to make it. My timeline is too short. If you start as a server when you're 20 and you save the whole time, that'd be different. But, this is too short of a time. So I have this crazy idea that I want to open a restaurant. The move to Stratford, Ontario, it wasn't an accident and it wasn't done on a whim. I had been an analyst, so I did what analysts do. I started analyzing demographic information because at the time I thought, my demographic is the middle class because I want to open a diner, but I want it to be a predominantly plant-based diner, which means that I'd like it to be in an area that is geographically located near other areas, none of which have anything like this. And in addition to that, I'd like it to be in a relatively modern thinking rural town. I weaned it down to Stratford or Collingwood. Those are the two places I would crush it in Collingwood. But I chose Stratford. And so I come to Stratford and I spent the first year before going to Perth Community Futures. I spent the first year as a bookkeeper working for some of the local restaurants. This would give me a year to sort of breathe in the atmosphere of the theater, of the seasons, to sit back and watch as a viewer what works and what doesn't, what I would do a little differently. So about a year later, and for the record, I was very honest with the restaurants that I worked for. I told them why I'd moved there. I wasn't looking to pull any punches. They were all incredibly happy for me. And so I did my 1-year bid as a bookkeeper and I walked into Perth Community Futures with this crazy idea to open a predominantly plant-based restaurant smack dab in the middle of pork country. So I figured that maybe it would take 2 or 3 weeks. I would get this form letter. I pictured it coming on in the mail. It was a typed letter with one of those pre-scanned signatures. They didn't even take the time to sign it themselves. But instead, Alex called me the next day when he read my business plan, and I put a lot of heart and thought into my business plan. And he said, I can pitch this. This is a great idea. And my mind was blown. And so he worked with me and the Planet Diner was born. I opened my doors April 11th of 2018. Some of the things that I did that would later save me from the pandemic. And some of the things that I did, um, that I did because of that year of watching, when I watched and I was bookkeeping for that year, I noticed a few things. One of the things that I noticed was that local towns like ours that have, smaller population sizes, that population size is still large enough that it can sustain businesses. And yet, what happens, at least here, I don't know about where you all are, but here, what happens is all these locals that are sort of saving your butt all through the dark season in the winter, they walk into a restaurant in the summer and they can't get a table. The restaurant is completely empty and they say, "Table for two, please." And the host says, "Oh, I'm so sorry. We actually are totally booked up tonight." And you think, but there's no one in here. So I decided I'm not going to have any reservations. It's going to be first come, first serve. Everyone's going to get a fair shake. And the other decision I made is that I would nail takeout from the moment I opened my doors. The reason behind it was that if you don't feel like eating amidst the mayhem of tourism in the summer, then all these good people, I am a locally focused business, all these good people can get takeout, enjoy their favorite food, and go home. Little did I know that decision would absolutely save my tail later, because when the pandemic struck, I remember my head server calling me on the Monday. By the way, I had no idea what was happening. I was in Grand Bend on a beach with my dogs throwing the ball. She had to call me and go, "Dude, like the world just shut down." I was like, "Seriously?" And she said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I don't know, let's do takeout. Like we're a locally focused diner and we've always done takeout. Let's do takeout and see how it goes." And we were really, really lucky. We didn't really miss a beat. Our sales dropped, but they didn't drop so low that we couldn't sustain ourselves. And so we managed to coast through. Some of the other decisions that I made through the pandemic, some of the positives that came out of that experience was there was a point when the wage subsidy came long after CERB. And what happened for most of us in the trenches was that a lot of our staff is, they're at work and they're looking at their friends sitting at home making not that much less than what they're making. And so I made this decision, why don't we close Wednesdays and you'll have 3 days off with your family? And, in the aftermath, I started to realize, wow, that was one of the greatest decisions that I made. I'm actually not going to reopen Wednesdays because the last year the world got a taste of a proper work-life balance, and I don't ever want to change that. And there is a well-known thought process that if you work in hospitality, you have to be willing to make a sacrifice, because essentially, if you're a chef, you make no money. Restaurants have terrible hours. We're open Friday and Saturday night. You'll never get the night off. You'll never get 2 days off in a row. And so I learned through the pandemic, when I decided to close Wednesdays, I originally did it because I thought it would give my team the opportunity to have 3 days off with their family. I can't make up for being at home and give you what CERB will offer you, but I can do this. And in the aftermath, I was like, I want to change hospitality. I want to inspire other restaurants to do what I'm doing, because in fact, my Thursday sales started to spike because they missed me, right? They missed you from being closed 3 days. And some of the other things that we nailed was, one of the things that the world might not realize is that restaurants that have dine-in, as a general rule, they hate takeout across the board. And one of the reasons that they hate takeout is that when you guys go in and order takeout from a dine-in restaurant, as you know, you feel uncomfortable. You don't know where the hell you're supposed to stand. You feel like you're infringing. There are no processes set up. For some reason, the server's a little bit grumpy when she rings your order out. She's grumpy because, you know, she has to tip the kitchen out on her sales, and you generally don't tip on takeout. So I changed some of those things right away. And I think that is the benefit of working in the trenches the way that I did. I know what it is to be a dishwasher and a server and a chef. I know what it is to be on the line when it's busy. So, you know, I'm blessed when I hear the people who inspire me talk about how you need to do what you love to do. That's really what I did. I essentially monetized what I love to do. And because of that, I was able to, you know, you're never going to tip on takeout. We created systems so that when guests come in and want to order takeout, there's nothing to it, you know, and they know it. So when the world shut down, they knew they could count on us. If you want to send me an e-transfer, we'll run the food out to your car. And the one thing I wasn't expecting is that, you know, when I first opened the Planet Diner, I remember telling Alex, and I want to do donuts. And some of you are laughing because you've probably had the donuts. So that was actually a labor of love. I didn't expect anything to come out of that. I bought this little plexiglass countertop display. I thought I'll throw a dozen donuts in there. It'll be a fun little treat for the kids. And that was about the end of it. Let me tell you something. Those donuts, those stupid donuts, the minute we went into the first lockdown, my donut sales like quadrupled. Those donuts became this like the highlight of a locals week. You had like mother-daughter teams that went for their weekly walk and they came to buy a pack of donuts. You had people buying packs of donuts for nurses and doctors. They were sending them to the hospitals. They were sending them to the police station. Our donut sales, like absolutely, those donuts saved our tail some days when takeout was slowing down. As restaurants all started to open for takeout, suddenly what set us apart were these donuts. And I got to tell you, most of the people that order them don't know that they're vegan donuts. They just know that they're donuts and they're handmade. So, you know, and now that's all I'm known for. Instead of D, wherever I go, it's donuts. Oh my God, you're the donuts. You know, you're watching the Santa Claus parade, and from the top of a float, no kidding, a guy yelled out, "Hey, do you have any donuts left?" That's all that I'm known for. But you know, I like, how do you say thank you to the people, to the organization that saved me, that, you know, gave me a chance? There's really no way of doing that, other than to promise that I'll continue to be a giant, especially to young women that want to climb. And if they surpass me, I'm going to cheer them on. I'm going to hope that they surpass me. I'm going to hope that the glass ceiling gets shattered and I'll be cheering them on while they pass me. It's such an incredible honor to get to do what I absolutely love to do. It's an honor to be able to challenge people's stereotypes around plant-based eating. It's incredible that we've created this amazing environment, unlike any other place that I know of, because we're 90% plant-based and 10% meat. And part of the reason that I chose that instead of doing strictly plant-based is that, you know, even at the worst moments of my childhood growing up, there are those moments around the table when you're eating that is a social moment. That's such a special moment for families. And I didn't want to be righteous and indignant. When I look at the amazing people who inspire me, no one inspires through righteous indignation. So I didn't want to go all one or all the other. I thought, why don't we create this awesome place where people can just eat together, where we have a gluten-free deep fryer and we do food that people recognize that are price point that the middle class can afford. And it's a place that, like, if grandpa wants to order a pulled pork sandwich, then damn it, he can order one. And if his granddaughter is completely vegan and, you know, going to like political rallies, then she can have a vegan burger and they can eat together at the same table and it's no big deal. And inadvertently, if we became um, a hot spot for takeout, especially in the last year, one of the reasons is that we do give a nod to everybody. We were the one place everybody could order food. There was no other place like it. How do you feed an entire family? Everybody has a vegetarian these days. Everybody has, you know, a righteous meat eater. Everybody has, everybody has a gluten intolerant or a celiac these days, or someone with some kind of a wacky allergy. And that's kind of what we do. Like, we feed groups of people. So I see some of you laughing like, yep, we do. We got one of all of those things. Check. So I guess by honoring by honoring who I am as a person, and I've always been the kind of person that sort of accepts everybody. Inadvertently, I created an environment that did the same thing. It's an environment where you can drop your shoulders, where everybody can just sit and eat a meal together. And you know, that wasn't an easy choice. The first few weeks out of the gate, we got a lot of hate. We got a lot of righteous vegan groups that were posting on our walls. I had to constantly pull down notes from vegan groups all over the place. You know, on Instagram and on Facebook, I was being called murderer. At one point, I was threatened, you know, to go 100% vegan in the next 2 weeks, or we're going to do a major media blast. But patiently, I reached out to each one of those groups and I explained why I'm doing what I'm doing. That in fact, if what you're trying to do is inspire the whole of society to include plant-based eating, what we've done is create the first environment that can get mainstream herbivores, like people or omnivores that eat meat still, they can be veg curious. They can be around vegan food and go, that's vegan. And we go, yeah, man, that's vegan. And I got to tell you, the vegan burgers way outsell the few meat things that we offer. And, you know, my dad died of cancer when I was 23. And I often say he would never have eaten at a vegetarian restaurant, but he'd have come and eaten at my diner. He'd have eaten our burger and he wouldn't have cared that it was vegan either. And I love that we've created that. And by honoring it, you know, we've weathered the storm the last year. We were able to sustain ourselves, and a lot of places weren't. So knock on wood, we're going to keep going strong. And I don't know how to thank you. It's an honor to be here tonight, and it's an honor to represent. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, Dee. Couple of things. I totally am one of those families. You know, I have a vegan, a vegetarian, a chicken and rib eating vegetarian. We have different ones in our family. We've been as a family to your diner. Absolutely loved it. So, and as you said, it's not just about the food. It's about having a place where everybody can come in and sit down, and there's something for everybody, and it's not a big deal, and everybody just enjoys the meal together. So it really is. So I can certainly attest to that. This is the third, I don't know if you know this is the third time I've heard you speak. So Kevin and I first heard you speak at, it was an annual general meeting, I think, of WOCFDCA.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, and you had spoke as a client of Perth, and we were just blown away. I was so inspired by you then. I was inspired by you the second time and again tonight. So thank you for that. Every time that you speak, I take away something more that I build on. So I know personally, I appreciate that. And this year, the theme Choose to Challenge couldn't be more perfect for your journey and for, you know, your points that you've made to us. So I really appreciate that. And I think we all do. So thank you.
Thanks so much.
So Rebecca, if you're ready, hopefully we'll have some time maybe for some questions for Dee, but if we can move on to the draw. The first one will be, I don't have a drum, sorry guys, I should have. And my table in front of me is an ironing board so that I could get it to the level I wanted. So I'm not going to touch anything and beat on it because it might go crashing down.
No.
So the first one will be for Purely Wicked in St. Thomas, owned by Kim Goodhue. So who do we have, Rebecca?
The winner of that one is Jen Buchanan. Jen? Yeah.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
The second one will be for Urban Diva Boutique Spa in Belmont, owned by Paula Foster.
And the winner is Rebecca Byers.
Yay, congratulations, Rebecca.
Thank you.
The next one, I see Betty, the owner of Butter Me Up Soap Company, is on the call today. Hi, Betty.
Hi.
Her shop is in Elmer. So who's going to win that one?
Marna Berry has won that one. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Marna. I'm not sure if she heard you. She's on mute there. Oh, she did. I see a heart there. The next one is for James Street Home Decor in Port Stanley, owned by Wendy Kipp and her daughters Cassandra Kirby and Jessica Corbile.
And the winner is Catherine Jansen.
Oh, thank you.
Congratulations, Catherine. The next one is for the Dented Can in Rodney, owned by Michelle Tremblay.
And the winner is Janice Harris.
Congratulations,
Yay,
Jen.
thank you.
No problem.
And then the next one is for the Planet Diner in Stratford. So who's going to be visiting Dee?
The final winner is Sue Crowley.
Congratulations, Sue. So this year, I'll explain the process of collecting your gift certificates because we're doing this COVID style. Normally we would either you would come to us or we'd present it to you. So I will make arrangements with each business. I've contacted each of them. Some of them already have that. They will have your name and the gift certificate there. So you can reach out to the business. If it's a shop, you can go in, do your shopping. Some of them have online. I know like Betty's, she has an amazing online shop, although I would really recommend going into her storefront because it's an experience in itself. So you can check them out either online or go to their shop. They will have your name and they will have the certificates there. So congratulations to everyone.
Thank you.
So does anyone have any questions for Dee? You can just unmute yourself. We don't need to. I see there's a couple in the chat box. Don't know. Let me see here. Oh, that was from, okay, those were from earlier. So if you'd like to unmute yourself, if anyone has any questions, go ahead.
I have one for Dee. So during the whole, I know you shut down one extra day a week to accommodate for the pandemic and for your staff. When you were going through the whole process at its darkest time, whenever that is in Stratford, did you have to lay anybody off or were you able to keep your people all intact throughout that period of time because of the one-day shutdown?
We had, so in Stratford, because we're a tourist-based industry, we actually lay off at the end of in the mid-fall anyway. I was lucky enough that I only really had 4 staff at that point. I hadn't yet brought a bunch of new people on to get through the summer. So I had one part-timer and she was happy just to go home. She only had a couple shifts a week anyway. So we dropped back to the 2 full-time people who'd always been there. And yeah, but normally I would have had a 3rd person. It just so happened the timing worked out and it was she and I, it was my server and I, so we weathered it together. We didn't have to lay anyone off.
That's terrific. Yeah, it's good. I mean, because you are, you encompass 2 of the hardest hit industries, that being, you know, restaurants and tourism. it's a deadly combination over the last year. So the fact that you are here talking about your successes is inspirational, or should be inspirational to any entrepreneur in this group. So again, I just want to take this opportunity. I promised I wouldn't come back on and say anything, but I just want to say again, thank you so much for joining us again this year. I, like Janice, have now seen you speak 3 times, and quite frankly, can't wait for the 4th. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Hi, Catherine. Did you want to say something there? Thought I saw your screen light up. Dee, I have a question, and you had mentioned about, and I thought this was really interesting, about changing the hospitality, or at least the viewpoint from the hospitality industry, from being a just, working nonstop and with, I don't want to say very few perks, but it's a grueling industry.
Yeah, it's a sacrifice.
Yeah. So what are some of the things, because you have so much experience in so many of the positions, right, from the entry level to owner, that you'd like to see that could be starting points?
When I spent the year as a restaurant bookkeeper, I remember when I was deciding on my opening hours, I was looking at, I'm going to leave the early hours of the morning to the early morning diners. They can have those. So we're not going to open until 11 a.m. And then I looked at the late night shift. So usually you would come on, if you open at 11 a.m., the first chef is usually there around 9 a.m. They work until the restaurant is closed. And that's usually 5 to 6 days a week. There's usually 1 day off. That is the standard in the industry. You never get 2 days off in a row. You might get another half day. Maybe if you have seniority, you get 2 days, but they're never in a row. So I remember studying the last seating and thinking, I could pluck off that, you could close at 8 p.m. and you could sustain yourself. I could pluck off that last round of seating and my staff could have a life. They would only have to, if they were here from open to close, they would get at the ourselves, because the labor, when you're looking at labor and income, that last seating, the way that compared to the quality of life for your staff, it's just not even a competition. So I started to think, gosh, we could create an environment where you only work 4 days a week. We're open from 11 to 8. Nobody cares if they work from open to close because they get 3 days off in a row. Suddenly now you have a restaurant that has 0 turnover. That's impossible. Now I get resumes sent to me because who doesn't want to work passionately around food, but have 3 days off with their family? And maybe, if you get an 8 o'clock close, the kitchen closes at 7:30, the chefs can be at home at night to tuck their kids in. Like, if I've realized anything, I want to inspire other restaurants to make similar choices. You want to do that late shift and stay open till 11, then make sure that you're, maybe you don't need to be open for the lunch shift. Maybe you can make choices to close. It's not going to kill us to close 3 days a week. The world will get used to it. You'll cook. Like, does every restaurant need to be open 7 days a week? Could we not have, I just think if there's anything, I'd like to inspire the industry to make some little changes like that. So the quality of work, and I didn't pay anyone any less. I made sure they were making the same amount. We would just squish it. So that's what I'd like to change.
Thank you. That's awesome. And I think as those messages get out, I find that with the pandemic, consumers are making decisions that align with their values even more now than ever.
Yeah.
So this is a perfect time to reassess and start to make some of those changes.
Mhm.
So it's interesting. I had not heard of anybody doing something like that. So it's, I hope it catches on.
Me too.
Janice,
Yes.
I have a quick question. It's
Yeah.
a bit of a personal question. I'm curious if you ever proved your doctor wrong.
I did. I have no registered cholesterol now.
That's
And when
awesome.
I went back in and he did a test again. It was very anticlimactic though, when he finally did come in and say, no, your cholesterol is good. And I'm like, dude, yeah. When I told him I went plant-based, he didn't support it actually. He thought I was out of my mind. And then he said, how's your B12? And I said, well, you have my numbers, you tell me. And he said, no, your iron's good, your B12 is good. And you have your cholesterol is well below. Yeah, so I nailed it basically.
That's awesome. So any other questions? Hi, Jim, you're still here.
I think Betty has a question.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Betty.
Hi, Dee. I just wanted to say I really enjoy listening to you. You are an awesome speaker. I can just totally relate to what you had to say about restaurant work. I worked in a restaurant most of my life, 7-day-a-week restaurant, and missed out on so much. And as much as I loved the restaurant business, that was one of the reasons I finally had to leave. And it was time for something new. I kept telling myself, if I'm gonna work this hard, I might as well work for myself. And I have never looked back. I still do miss the restaurant work because it was always my passion. But now that I'm on my own, also cut back hours. I have days off where I take time for my family. And yeah, everything that you had to say about restaurants, it just really hit home for me. So yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. So I secretly wish that I could have worked for you at some point instead of, weekends and every day. But yeah, no regrets. All is good. And yeah, I really enjoyed listening to your stories. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Dee,
No, go ahead,
can I go ahead?
please.
I'm just wondering, how are you able to source most of your ingredients within the Southwestern Ontario region?
The short answer is no. It's funny because people are very proud of the fact that we make everything in-house, and we don't make everything in-house, but we make 90% of it in-house. Little do they know that was because I couldn't get anything. But what's exciting is that since I opened to now, 3 years later, now suddenly mainstream restaurant suppliers are sending me, like I asked my restaurant supplier one time, are you sending me these like plant-based options specifically? And he said, no, those are mainstream mail outs. So like the Gordon Food Service and Cisco, they send out, hey, these are some new suppliers we picked up, and they happen to be just a huge number of gluten-free options or plant-based options, and I'm blown away by it. At first, I had to make my own ice cream. To 3 years later, there's like 4 different ice cream suppliers. So it's getting, of course, now that I make it all myself, that's when all the suppliers start. But yeah, it's been really, that part was really challenging. Initially, it was really, my food costs have actually come down substantially as I've gotten better at like what ingredients can I use. The stuff you'd use at home, maybe like cashews, I would use at home. I can't use cashews. Why don't we play with sunflower seeds? Like, yeah, but it's been a learning experience, but it's getting a lot better.
I have a question. First, I just wanted to thank EBRC for putting this on. What a lovely contribution to International Women's Day /week/month, and an incredible story. So thank you so much for sharing it. It's the first time I've heard it. So I've been direct messaging a few people throughout this saying how I was blown away. I'm going to maybe tackle a little bit of a different angle, but you mentioned that you would crush it in Collingwood. And you know, you obviously settled on Stratford. What other communities maybe did you even like were on your long list? And then obviously here in St. Thomas, you know, we love our community in Elgin County and what we have to offer. And there's maybe a lot of similar attributes to Stratford. But where do you think we might angle in on to really own a space of it? So, I mean, we're not maybe the elevated Stratford level of things, but I guess two things. Who else is on your horizon and what could we be doing better?
What other locations are on my horizon, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, where you, again, you mentioned like Crushing and Collingwood. So
Yeah.
where else were you even looking?
Because of the demographic, because we don't necessarily, when we look at demographic information for, and not strictly plant-based eaters, but eaters, people who have a tendency, you know, if you're the person that, if your friend invites you out and says, hey, we're going to a vegetarian place, and you go, yeah, great. Those are the people that we generally do well. Those people happen to be a lot of the people who live in Collingwood. Plus in Collingwood, even if you're there and you're 80 and you're retired, you're incredibly active. You're skiing, like you're still really active. So St. Thomas, I didn't consider because of you're so close to London. And London, for whatever reason, is a hotbed of vegan plate. You guys have enormous numbers of vegan restaurants. I think you had the first vegan drive-in Canada was in London. I have considered like Bayfield, Grand Bend, Goderich, some area like that. I seriously considered, like I was looking at real estate in Goderich, considering like, you know, you could do takeout only and sort of be a COVID proof takeout only, soft serve, you know, and offer mainstream ideas like soft serve and, you know, really tasty, crazy hot dogs and burgers, but they all are inadvertently plant-based. You could please a lot of people. And yeah, I've considered that. I haven't really looked at a lot of other places. But I seriously, during the pandemic, thought I could open takeout only places. You would have limited staff, the cost would be really low, and you could inadvertently, you know, impact nutrition and environment in small communities that don't have. People go to places like Grand Bend for tourists. They think, yeah, you can nail it in the summer for tourism. They don't realize that these small communities, there are enough people to sustain businesses that if you hone in on being locally focused rather than tourist focused, it's a happy accident that happened to be a COVID proof idea. That I always have been focused on locals. I was never focused on tourism. So whatever areas I would look at for expansion, it would be locally focused. It wouldn't be because of tourism. But yeah, I never really considered, St. Thomas itself is so cute, but your close proximity to London is why I never considered it. Lucky buggers, you got tons of them.
Super insightful response. Super insightful. Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Anyone else? Well, thank you, Dee. I think we'll probably wrap it up if nobody else has any questions. I think that was a record. We're actually on time. So that's fantastic. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Dee, I don't know if you, if anybody would like to connect with you through the Planet Diner, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, the Planet Diner's email goes straight to my phone actually, and nobody else opens it but me. So you can curse, you can do whatever you want.
But please don't.
No, that would be fun. That could be fun.
I'm in the restaurant industry, you guys. People drop the F-bomb like it's nothing. You can say whatever the hell you want in my email.
And I just want to thank you again, Dee, as well. And I don't want to interrupt Janice, of course, but you know, so much of your story has created your situation as well. So like you've sort of grown out of all of this stuff. It's this crazy mix that has come together that makes you what you are. And that's why we enjoy listening to you so much, because not only are you super successful, but you've overcome incredible odds against, and those two that combination is truly inspiring to everybody. So congratulations again to your success. And again, awesome to hear you speak. Sorry, Janice.
That's okay. And I wanted to say congratulations to the winners of the gift certificates. Please enjoy your shopping, happy shopping, and support these amazing local women businesses. They are amazing. So thank you. Have a great night, everyone.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night.